You're listening to Catching Wildfire, a podcast by the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. Welcome to the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association's podcast. And I want to thank Chief Zagaris for joining us today, Steve Sickler and Chief Ken Kemna, where today we're going to talk about Genasys and its impact on emergency response and evacuations. I also want to thank FirstNet. AT&T FirstNet is the company responsible for the building and construction of the nationwide public safety broadband network, which you and I know as FirstNet. We have as our guest today Steve Sickler. Steve Sickler is the Vice President of Sales and Operation at Genasys. We have a long relationship with Steve, and he does such an awesome job of connecting with the fire service and emergency services in general. One of the most credible people in industry, and it's nice to have you here today, Steve. And joining him is Chief Ken Kemna. Many of you remember Chief Kemna as his role as the fire chief of Santa Clara County and subsequently Redmond, Oregon. And Chief Kemna is the senior policy advisor to the Western Fire Chiefs. And maybe that's a good place to start, Chief Kemna, is like, what's the Western have to do with Genasys and public safety technology in general?
It's actually a very good question, and one that I get quite a bit. People are wondering, what does the Western Fire Chiefs Association have to do with Genasys or any of the technology partners that they see us working with? You know, for me, I'll touch on this from 2 points. My personal viewpoint, this really stems back to a conversation, frankly, that you and I and Chief Zagaris and Chief Niemeyer and many of the Western Fire Chiefs Association members had at Force in Boise, Idaho, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
We were talking about, and I remember the example, we were talking about why is it so hard to get some of the technology solutions that we need? I can order a pizza and they know where I am as I'm ordering the pizza. Why can't it just be that simple? So for me, the relationship between Western and our technology partners is kind of that. Let's try to make it that simple. As first responders, we need really simple, straightforward, intuitive solutions. I don't need complexity. I don't need a whole bunch of layers. I need something that's going to work when I need it. When it's really hitting the fan, I need something that's going to work. And we resolved in that moment that we were going to lean in. The Western was going to lean into the conversation with our technology partners. The problems that they were solving weren't dreamed up in a boardroom by technologists and engineers, but they came from public safety, really an outgrowth of the things that we need to make decisions when time is of the essence. We wanted to lean into that conversation, and we really were able to leverage the entrepreneurial nature of the Western Fire Chiefs in general to have the latitude to be able to do that. So we partner with technology specifically because it gives today's fire service a voice in the indispensable tool that technology and all that means can provide to us in serving the communities that we collectively serve. And it gives them an advocate, somebody that can argue on their behalf for the things that they need when technologists are looking at it from a market share perspective or a scalability perspective. It gives them a voice in the room to say, yeah, but this is what I actually need to do my job. So how about we solve that? So that's why I'm here. And I think that's why Western really participates in this conversation, works with our technology partners the way that we do.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of inserting the public safety anchor and mindset and ethos into the commercial sector before they get to market. So we know they're solving problems that really exist, and the fire chiefs know that the Western is in there and making a difference. They're basically like a gold star partner because we were willing to partner with them. I love that. Steve, so what is Genasys? Like, I know it's the beginning of everything, but what is Genasys as it relates to this product?
Genasys with an A, by the way, Genasys. We're a protective communications technology company. The company's been around since the early 90s. Their initial product is LRAD, Long Range Acoustic Devices. They're actually a very, very unique, capable communication system that is clear human voice every U.S. warship has Genasys speakers to give them time and distance from a perceived enemy. If someone comes cruising up to a U.S. warship, they can, miles away, they can warn them using these LRAD speakers. So that's the beginning of the company. Our CEO had a great vision, which was, hey, we've got this warning system that can be used for the public, not just in the military. And our first big customer was the nation of Japan after the earthquake that devastated the nuclear reactor and such. And they purchased about 1,100 of our long range acoustic devices. But once again, how do we tie that into a system that can alert the public? And so they started building software that allowed messages to be sent to these speakers remotely. And along the way, they found Zonehaven, which is where I entered the picture. I was an early employee at Zonehaven, which was a zone-based public communication alerting platform. And they also built software that ties that all together. So at the end of the day, what Genasys is now is the one and only end-to-end provider of protective communication. From the time a first responder arrives on scene, they can look at a map, they can see communication zones on the map, they can call for an evacuation or a warning or a road closure, communicate that instantly, and it transmits to the public via their cell phones and the like, and all the way to the speakers. So that's at its essence, that's what Genasys is.
Love that connection about the genesis of the company, and really creating audio warning at scale and at distance, right? Stop this, do this, just really directional, but in an audio level, and then you kind of port that over into a clear instructions at a distance, but digitally, right?
I mean, look what happened at Kerrville, Texas, right? A huge tragedy, flooding, 100 people killed, and that could have been avoided. Why? Yeah. Because if they had the way they communicate, and this is what's been done for many, many years, is broad-based warnings, tornado warnings, flood warnings. In this case, a severe storm warning, a flood warning, a flood emergency. But people get these, they go across many counties, and people have basically been trained to ignore them. With Genasys, they're targeted and precise because we've predetermined evacuation, potential low-lying areas that are subject to flood. Those are precision zones that first responders can send clear instructions. And if they don't have cell service, like at Camp Mystic, they could have had these long-range acoustic devices giving, once again, clear instructions, even if they don't have cell service.
Love that. And who's your typical customer, right? I got to guess it's not typically a fire department, but it could be. Like, who is your typical customer? And then how does the public safety community enter this portal? You can't just organically, as a company, start firing messages out. There's got to be triggers and prearranged expectations.
At the end of the day, our customers are usually cities and counties. But I will tell you, the prime advocate for this technology tends to be the fire department. And the reason is the fire department is often the first folks on scene. And the first thing they realize is, okay, I got this thing's going big. I got to get people. My first job is get people out of the way. So by using this technology, they see immediately, oh, they can get on the radio. They can look at their phone. They can go, I need to evacuate Echo 171342. Send that to emergency management, and then they can go to work, right? They're like, okay. And then they can see in 5 minutes, their phone gets an alert, and those areas have already gotten clear evacuation instructions, and they don't have to worry about it anymore. And I don't have to tell you guys, and I've heard enough stories from enough fire chiefs or battalion chiefs, man, that's a cluster at the beginning of these events, trying to get the instructions. Okay, south of here, north of here, draw it on a map, send it to them. They turn it into text. You got to approve it. Hey, I'm kind of busy. I got all kinds of coming in. Yeah, it's a mess, right? So we take that mess away. So to answer your question, yes, our buyers tend to be the emergency management departments, but it's in the sheriff's department. But often firefighters are our cheerleaders for this.
Part of the challenge of technology is always to reduce the cognitive load of the incident command. And I love the concept of preloading some actions. This is a flood zone, and I'm going to preload this action. So now all the chief has to do is say, okay, I need to evacuate that zone that's preloaded. It's like pull the trigger and things start to happen. Chief Segaris, I'm sure you have plenty of experience in this area, and I'm sure you're generating all sorts of questions.
Well, as Steve was talking, I remember the Zonehaven days, and then they're moved to Genasys, and so it's been interesting to watch. Like a lot of the technology over the last 10 years, it's been booming. But what's kind of interesting is that we know there's other people doing this. What makes Genasys better or different than some of the other folks that are out there or been out there?
There's a number of legacy alerting systems out there, right? There's a bunch of competition for mass communication, right? Sending alerts to your cell phone and so forth. Genasys through Zonehaven really pioneered the idea, and this was not our idea. Back to Ken's point, this is really some key firefighters. Chief Whitaker up in Rangarinda, Captain Ingram in Santa Clara, where Ken grew up, Matt Sampson and San Mateo up, Jonathan Cox. This was their idea, and what they said is it's too much work at the front end, and so we developed. The beginning of the company was to develop an algorithm that uses a lot of different data sets, 30 plus data sets. And that algorithm is just where we start. So we create the zones for our customers, we give it to them, and then they use the local knowledge to optimize those zones given the knowledge they have. We're the only one that does that. That's what sets us apart. There's folks out there that, you can draw on a tablet a area to be evacuated, but guess what? That still has to be turned into text, because when you send it to an iPhone or an Android, the end user, the resident, they get an instruction and it says north of here, south of here, so forth. With us, they say you're in an evacuation area, and there's a link. They can click on it, and it goes right to our website. They can see where they are as a blue dot. They can see where the incident is, and they can see you're in an evacuation zone. And we're even connected to Waze, and we're the only one there that is connected to Waze with a partnership in Google, where they can click on Waze and get a link in our app to click on Waze and be directed out of danger, and Waze is cognizant of where the danger is and how to get them out. So those are the two primary things. I mean, the mass communication, the sending the text messages, that's kind of a commodity. But by pulling it all together and adding the speakers to the end, our success stories are all about from the time fire arrives on scene and calls for an emergency, the residents are alerted in 5 minutes or less. I mean, and no one's doing that other than us.
Things have really changed considerably, and it's just been remarkable to watch this evolve, even from the Zonehaven to this day where we're at today, and how it's actually shared with other applications out there. I use one as as you watch what Watch Duty's doing, and it's now that Antera is coming out with a new program to kind of mirror what Watch Duty does, to watch this continue to evolve more and more out there.
One of the keys is to share this data. I mean, we are sharing this data. We share this data with virtually everybody. Now, if they're going to use it for profit, or if you're a big enterprise, we'll charge for sharing the data. But generally speaking, yes, we want this data. We want this to be ubiquitous. We'll find the people where they are. So if they're using Watch Duty, it shows up on Watch Duty, and they can see the zones, they can see the information, and then it says provided by Genasys Protect. If they're using Antera, it shows up on Antera. We have a partnership in Oregon. We show up on the Raptor system. And all we care is the public gets the information as fast as possible in any way that they are used to getting it.
Chief Kemner or Steve, do you have favorite success stories about how Genasys was implemented effectively and really changed the outcome for the incident commander?
My initial exposure to the system, for me, it was a really interesting moment. In 2020, we had a very significant fire season in the West. California, Washington, and Oregon had a very significant fire season, more so than they had had in quite some time. I received a phone call. I was fire chief in Redmond, received a phone call from my sister who lived in Santa Cruz at the time. And in Santa Cruz, the CZU lightning complex was creating havoc along up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it was burning from north to south. And my sister lives in Santa Cruz, literally blocks from the beach. And as the fire was burning south towards her residence, many miles away, there was a possibility she might get evacuated. So she called me on the phone, and I'm in Bend, Oregon, so I'm a few hundred miles away. She calls me looking for some advice on what to do, and I told her, of course, just go. If you get the order to evacuate, just go. Don't worry about taking anything with you. I said, but in the meantime, let me gather up some information. I'll see what I can find out for you about what's going on. So I logged into Intera, as one does, because I had access to the system. Pulled up a little bit of information about the fire. Found Cal Fire had put out some information about evacuations, and I saw the link. So I clicked on the link, and it opened up a map. And I was looking at the very first time I'd ever seen the Genasys or Zonehaven at that time map of the zones that were either already under evacuation order or prepared to go under evacuation order. And I thought to myself, all right, pretty impressive. This is really good. I gave my sister the information, the link to that. And from that moment on, for the next week, she was able to get all the information that she needed all by herself. She didn't have to call me. She was able to get the information that she needed about evacuations and the status of the fire and all of that. To me, that was it. That was the moment. Somebody had created a tool to communicate effectively information about an ongoing emergency. They didn't have to call the dispatch center. They didn't have to call it. They didn't have to call anybody. They could get that information all by themselves. And I knew that I was seeing something that had completely changed the fundamental components of the game. That to me was an absolute watershed moment, and I knew we were seeing something different from that moment.
You talk about finding a way to appeal to fire chiefs. Tell them their family's not going to bug them in the middle of something. Right. Steve, do you have a favorite customer experience?
I mean, I've got a few, and the crazy thing is, as a technology vendor, you're not used to your customers hugging you. You guys fire chiefs, you get hugs all the time, I know, but yeah, my first experience was I showed up at Yuba County. They had just had a fire, pretty big incident. I showed up actually in my motorhome with my puppy, going around seeing all my customers in California. And I walk into the room, the sheriff shakes my hand and slaps my back, and the emergency manager hugs me, and I'm like, what is going on? They go, well, we had an incident last week, and from the time fire called in the incident to the phones lighting up with the evacuation instructions was 7 minutes. Follow that with the Dixie fire in Lassen County and such. Same kind of thing, right? They were like, when it was going hard and fast at the beginning, they were able to get instructions out very, very quickly. And something I should say about Genasys as a company is this past season, we had the lake fire in Utah. And just the culture of our company, and I want everybody to know this, is our CEO says, if they need our system, they can have it. We'll work out the money later. And so we actually got a call from one of the incident commanders that was on his way to the lake fire to help out from California. And he said, do you have zones in Utah? I said, yep, we've got them. We're creating zones all across the entire country. Once again, they're preliminary zones. It's up to the local authorities to decide how to adjust them. But we dispatched one of our support folks. They were on scene, and they were conducting evacuations and public communication via our system, within 6 or 7 hours of the fire starting. And, it's just a great feeling to see a company that's willing to do that, and the results where at the end of the day, you get a hug.
Well, and my compliments, Chief and Steve. Like, the one thing fire people know is calls don't always go right. And what I've known from talking to the two of you in the middle of some of these things is when things go wrong, you're the first people to say, well, we can make that better. We can improve this. We can fix that. It's like it's the companies that believe their stuff is perfect and flawless. They don't get anywhere with public safety. We don't have time for that. We've never had a perfect call in our life. So I just love the whole attitude and engagement, and the fact you'll give first and get second. I think that really defines you. Chief Z.
What that's I had not heard that story. It's outstanding. So, um, let's talk about how Genasys works in the absence of cellular coverage up there. Um, can you explain how that happens, or does it happen?
It's a tough one, right? Because if the public doesn't have cell service, how are they getting the information? I will tell you one thing that's really cool about the technology is we work with things with Sartopo. And so, in other words, people can preload our maps, our evacuation and public alerting zones into these technologies that they don't even have to have cell coverage, right? And it will, it shows them where they are. It shows the map, even if their phone isn't communicating. But then first responders, fire in the field, and this has happened a number of times, they can get on the radio and they can say, I need these zones evacuated. And they can communicate that to the public. There's two ways if they don't have cell service that really, obviously we have our long range acoustic devices, these outdoor warning systems. If they have those in place, fantastic. And these are in place in canyons outside Lake Tahoe and so forth that they really have a tough time communicating. But the other thing is radios. There's a lot of communities that are pretty smart about distributing these emergency AM radios. Some of them even have, you charge it with your hand, right? You don't even need a battery. And during an emergency, they can tune into these radios, and these same alerts that we're sending and these other mechanisms can go to these radios. So that's a very inexpensive way to make sure the residents have a way to get this information. I mean, at the end of the day, for the most part, if they smell smoke, they know, okay, I got to figure out how to get information. If they don't have cell service, hopefully they have TV, hopefully they have radio, hopefully they have some other mechanism.
I'd like to add a little bit to that from a first responder perspective, or from my perspective as an incident commander. I look at the ability to utilize technology and access to all the technology that can provide as a force multiplier. It is a bonus. But I live my life in a world where I know that plan A is only as good as long as plan A lasts. I may have to go to plan B or plan C, and who knows how far I'm going to have to go. So one of the things that I think is important about technology like Genasys, it leverages very simple technology. It leverages zone-based evacuation management plans. And if you've done nothing other than divide your community up into logical zones that you ground truth and make sense for your community, so you can get people out of harm's way or shelter them in place, or a combination of both, you've done the most important part. You've already started talking about evacuations and communicating with your community. You've done that. If you've identified the zones, you're going to have them in hard copy maps. We're never not going to have a map book in your rig. So even if technology isn't your friend in that moment and you don't have connectivity, if you look at the zone that you're standing in, you can, through over traditional land mobile radio, give those numbers to dispatch, get the process on. So you can still take advantage of the process of adopting the technology and use it when you have the coverage. One of the things that I find in a lot of communities that I work with is it's not lack of technology that keeps them from doing effective evacuation management. Frankly, it's lack of process, and it's fear of engaging in a conversation about the process and doing all of that work, and just going through the zone validation and adoption process before you identify how your zones are going to be when you're ground truthing them. Just going through that process alone is such a game changer for a community. Here in Deschutes County, we broke the county up into 4 quadrants, and we went through every single zone to validate whether or not it made sense to us as first responders. In the room was local law enforcement, fire agencies, NGOs, Oregon Department of Transportation, local planning. It was a very broad stakeholder group. And what I loved about that is, one, we were talking about evacuating the community long before we were going to have to do it. And we were building relationships with key stakeholders and partners way before there was smoke in the air. So even if we didn't have technology in that moment, We understood how to evacuate our community. We understood that we had zones. We already had relationships with one another. We were going to get people out of harm's way more effectively and efficiently than ever before. Technology was going to be a bonus if we could actually have coverage to make it work.
And this has been very frustrating for me personally, is kind of the Rockies West, they get it, right? From a standpoint of, we know sooner or later we're going to have to do evacuations because we're going to have a fire. And there's areas that used to never worry about this. The west side of the Cascades in Oregon, for instance, these are called the asbestos forests. I think the fire you originally talked about, Ken, the CZU Lightning Complex, as another one on the west side of the Santa Cruz Mountains that they thought, oh, this is a rainforest. It's not going to burn. Well, they dry out and that moss hanging from the trees becomes fuel. However, when you get over into the Mississippi Delta and east, we keep hearing, we don't do evacuations. Oh, gosh, darn it. When in the Kerrville floods, they should have done evacuations, right? They should have had a methodology that Ken just described so they could get people out of harm's way. They had hours before the flood waters rose. They had a lot of technology. They could have seen what might have happened. But I keep hearing this over and over and over. And when we talk to emergency personnel, they're like, we don't do evacuations. Well, my saying is, yeah, no one does evacuations until they have to. So it's just, this message needs to go more broad, because a tanker overturns on a highway with benzene gas coming out, an active shooter, flooding like we've seen never before. This technology gives you the precision that you don't have to over evacuate, right? Or you don't have to over notify. You can be very precise. Without this technology, they've just said, here's a tornado warning, here's a flood warning, here's a whatever, and everybody just ignores it. I've been in a restaurant with my daughters in Houston, and the phones go off, severe tornado warning. Everybody looks at it and puts it down on their desk, on their table. Okay, that doesn't work.
If you were talking to public safety, and you are today, what would you tell them? Like, what is the key message they need to get about why Genasys and why they need this technology?
It's very inexpensive. Second, it's a game changer if for any worst case scenario, right? So areas that right now might not be worried very much, look at Lahaina, right? Lahaina, that's a tragedy that, once again, an area that didn't think they'd ever have to do evacuations, right? And I think the key method is the key message is this is a very inexpensive but incredibly valuable technology that during these emergencies is a complete game changer, right? The time, the precision, the speed, and the clarity that this gives you. Like, only notify those people that really need it, do it really fast, and give them really clear instructions. That's what you need in any emergency. And if you don't have an emergency, guess what? You can tell them about road closures and landslides and other stuff and use the same technology. But during an emergency, I don't want to see another city or county see loss of life because they didn't think it would ever happen to them.
I think about it as a fire chief, and on the wall in my office and the wall in every building of every fire department in the country, there's a mission statement. And if I were to put all those mission statements into a pot and boil them and down to the basic element, the one thing that would come out of every single one of those is the protection of life. It is the purpose for which we exist as organizations, is to protect life. And if I'm to be true to that, I need to be doing everything I can as a public safety leader, not just as a fire chief, but as a public safety leader, to take community risk reduction seriously and do everything that I can to lean into these kinds of issues, build partnerships with key stakeholders, law, emergency management, NGOs, and everybody else, to make sure that when it does come to our community, whether it's hazardous materials or a wildfire or a flood, whatever it happens to be, I'm prepared, and we're prepared, not just to put an alert out to tell people to go get out of harm's way, but to truly manage that evacuation. Ultimately, I want to protect lives and get my community back up and sustainable and thriving again. That is what my goal is. And in good conscience as a fire chief, I can't stand on the sidelines and not participate in this discussion and not do everything that I can to make sure that I'm not protecting my community as efficiently and effectively as possible.
I reflect on Chief Zagaris and some of the incident command staff at the campfire in Paradise, California, walking through how that fire progressed from its start in Pulga all the way into Paradise and how that escalated. And I've got to say, working with the police department and whatnot, that was probably the most prepared community for an evacuation I'd ever seen. Like the police opened the trunk of their cars and you already have road signs pre-prepared. Do this, do that. They literally, to your point, Chief, they had you open a book and zone 1 is this and make these actions. And I've got to say, in my 15 years as fire chief at Tualatin Valley Fire, I wasn't that ready. I wasn't near that ready. And still, it ended up in congestion and all sorts of tragedy because there just weren't enough exit routes and the fire was moving faster than anyone could have reasonably anticipated. I think putting tools like Genasys in my hands as an incident commander, I think it makes a world of difference. I've always said that mergers and consolidations really reflect the ethos, Chief Kemna, that you brought up, which is one of the biggest benefits is you put two departments together and you literally have to take every program and say, what did you do? Well, this is what we did. And you come out of it with the best solution. And when you actually have to sit there and pre-think of everything you're going to do, there's major benefits that come from that. Chief Zagaris, any final thoughts?
I think, when you look at alert warnings and situations, most folks have taken for granted. And today, with the technology that's out there, it can be so much easier. And Genasys is just this example of how you can be, go from being, zeros in your community to the heroes if you utilize it and you are smart and think through, your different options that you have and why option A is your best. You better be prepared for B, C, and have those checkpoints in there to that checklist to make things happen. So just some great examples. Thank you, guys.
Steve, any final thoughts on your part, or Chief Kemna?
I'll take a quick one. So one of the things you just brought up was the campfire. And interestingly, the campfire had zones that nothing to do with Genasys or Zonehaven or anything. They had created zones. And unfortunately, and recently in the LA fire and the Eaton fire, people are calling into question the use of zones. They're calling in like, why didn't my zone get notified and so forth? As you mentioned before, nothing goes right 100% in these events. And there's, it's dark. The fire's moving 1,000 miles an hour. It's just craziness, right? But I will say wholeheartedly, zones are the answer. Whether or not those zones are activated or not, that has nothing to do with technology. But we really have to pay attention that the success of having these predetermined zones far outweighs any concern that having zones somehow misinforms the public, or if they're not notified properly, it must be because of the zones. That has nothing to do with it, right? There's other things that happen in these events. We've seen the after action reports of these events, but no one is saying they shouldn't have had zones. And that is the key differentiator that predetermines this precision, speed, and clarity that we provide.
I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity. I'm sitting here looking at the screen and I can't think of three people that know me better. Some of the, you guys are friends and mentors and colleagues, and I truly appreciate it. You know where I come from and you know what I am all about. And to me, this is such an important part of the legacy that we all leave to leave the fire service and our communities that we collectively continue to serve better than we found them. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I think it's incredibly important. I think it will absolutely get our colleagues and partners and fire service leaders better prepared to protect their community, because I guarantee you they are losing sleep like I did over what could happen in their community. And so I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to see you as always, and thank you.